and welcome to FinextraTV. I'm Liam Xavier. You join us here at EBAday 2026 in Copenhagen. With me right now is Daniel Hurst, International Line of Business Head, Enterprise Payments, EMEA and APAC at FIS Global. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much, Liam. It's lovely to see you again.
Absolutely. You've been a regular on these sofas, so no doubt more insights to come.
I hope so.
So we're talking a little bit about payments transformation.
Yeah.
It's a sort of buzzword a little bit like AI, and it means a lot of different things. If we're looking at actually what does that mean and what areas of the business are actually leading that change?
Thank you for, this is actually one of my favourite topics, payments transformation. And if I think of my every day, I think I spend every minute, and I'm sure you do, I'm sure that most people in this conference do, talking or conversing or planning or thinking about payments. And those two words, payments transformation, are really important. And I think, and I study the meaning of these words through history and through where we are today. Because fundamentally that's what I believe we provide to our bank clients. We provide capability to enable banks to transform their payments businesses. So payments transformation for me is something very key. Now the way you phrase that question is also really interesting to me, because it's really what are the, if you think from a banking perspective, what areas of the bank or the business are driving transformational change, yeah? And I would say 3 years ago, I would say that was really happening. Because at that point, if you remember, the discussion was cloud, was real-time growth and how the businesses are going to deliver this. It was ISO everywhere, ISO 20022. And then if you could establish a modern architecture, microservices-based, ideally, to support that, then you were transforming that area of the business to meet the demand, meet the needs, and that was that modernization agenda. So at that point, it felt like somewhat finite. It felt like we were working towards an end game. And then the last 18 months has happened. And I think over the last 18 months, we've got to a situation where I no longer feel it's really in the control of any one entity, of a bank or a set of banks or ourselves as technology providers, because the market has outpaced strategy and it's outpaced the planning that any of us can actually achieve on our own. It's just happened. And I think the two, and it's really on the agenda of this conference, the two items that have really driven that is now the fact we are in a hybrid processing world where we've got fiat and digital money or digital assets coming together, and all the connotations of that. And then we've got this huge wave of impressive capability called AI. And of course we have OpenAI and Anthropic really providing some real cool tools around that area. But the response of how that's reshaping what we do is really exciting, but quite frightening at the same time. So I just came back from a trip to see my Australian clients, and for whatever reason, in Australia, I think it's one of the fiercest areas where they're applying AI. And some of the bankers there were telling me how they are now looking at end-to-end capabilities, from defining requirements, automating the test creation, doing the development, creating the actual products, and actually moving batch-based processing away from their mainframes and doing that now in weeks. And of course, we're working on very similar things, but the fact that we're now talking in that way, for us, there's a great opportunity, but also a big threat, and also a bit of anxiety is we have to have AI, we've got to be building with AI first in the engines now. And so all these market dynamics, if you think about that question, I think internally the businesses are no longer probably transforming, they're being transformed, and it's how we all respond to that.
So if we perhaps flip my last question on its head, you've spoken about how the last 18 months has been a bit all over the place, should we say?
Well, yeah.
Is there an area of the business that perhaps is regressing or being an obstacle to transformation?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. If we think back, I like to talk visually. If we go back, 2-3 weeks, I think it was the Monaco Grand Prix. And that always gets a lot of attention because it's such a effervescent event on the sporting calendar. And there you have Kimi Antonelli, you've got Lewis, you've got Max, you've got all these new guys who fantastic sportsmen competing for the prize of the Grand Prix. Now, if you go back to the 80s, I remember Nigel Mansell and Prost and Senna, and they were in the McLaren or the Williams. Now, if you think, if we took Nigel and his Williams car back then and put it on that grid, two things are going to happen right from the start. One, unfortunately, he's probably going to get removed because his vehicle isn't compliant anymore. And then the second thing, on the basis they did let it go, I'm not too sure how competitive that vehicle is going to be. And it's the same with any sort of competitive field, and it's the same for payments. So I see, we've been working really for a long time in terms of getting those architectures ready to drive. And if we're going to respond to these dynamics that are occurring in the marketplace, then how can we enable institutions to respond to that quicker? So I think a big red flag in terms of regression is one where you're in that conversation with your partners and they're talking about the status quo or patching up current systems as opposed to really addressing that modernization, because I think delaying that now is going to be horrendously expensive. And if you think of that race scenario, it's got to be pretty uncompetitive as well. So I think part of my job is try a bit of evangelizing on that, but I'd like to help my clients, get their engines ready for racing. And I think we are at the starting point. I thought we were finishing, but it feels like we're at a starting point. So I think that technology evolution is a barrier, is a regression point.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And if we're talking again about getting it ready for the race, a lot of people are still trying to scale internationally.
Okay.
And there are areas, especially in Europe, where things are coming together as a sort of unified effort, but there are, of course, different regulations in different places. So what are the internal conversations that need to happen to make sure you can scale internationally, but still be able to fit into those different requirements?
Yes. So, scaling beyond borders, scaling internationally. As coming from a technology provider perspective, I see that in two ways, Liam, I think. Two ways. One is architecturally, and I'll talk about that, and then the other is making use of all these great initiatives that are occurring at a global level. So if I talk architecturally, and I'll put myself in the shoes of head of payments or a COO in a major global transaction bank. Now, these institutions they typically will have branches in 70, 80, maybe more, 100 countries all over the world. So, and to really compete in payments, they really want a presence with, say, real-time gross settlements in all of those countries, or real-time engines in all those countries, so they can move the money around in an independent way for their customers. Now, that's a big challenge, because to have, to build systems and capability across that wide geography is a huge endeavor. So I think architecturally this is where the technology that is being used is really important, because if you can have a uniform architecture which has generic capability in RTGS or real time, and you've distributed that engine, and you can rinse and repeat that engine in all the countries, but you've distributed the architecture so you can handle the clearing in a more separated way, in a quicker way, then you can actually scale your solution in a far more cost-effective and far more efficient way. And I think that's where the payment hub designs, payment hub infrastructure now leading the charge. That's certainly what we're doing to try and address architecturally some of those challenges for greater scope. Now, the other part of it, I think, is how we help the institutions, help ourselves take benefit of some of the great and exciting initiatives that are going on out there. One, for example, would be this Nexus project from the Bank of International Settlement, where we have many of the APAC regions, the real-time regions coming together to form a cross-border international real-time network. And that's also linking, I think, next year into the EPC, into Europe. So SEPA's getting ready with SEPA Instant one leg out processing, so we can start interchanging in this real-time interconnected world. We see the G20 initiative about standardization for lower cost and, again, speed of cross-border transactions. And the third, if you look at Swift's response, is really interesting, more on the digital asset side, where they've launched their Swift digital ledger, and we wish to be part of that. We're working with our clients to enable that, but that's then another way of breaking down those barriers that have existed from global transactions. So I think that element for me is local global. Is how we take local initiatives globally, and I think working in collaboration with these fantastic initiatives, my role being to enable that, I think that really unlocks some of that global growth.
Well, as ever, some really interesting thoughts, and thanks for coming into the studio.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you.